like in the middle of the party, wherever the party has shifted. So he's in the middle. So he's not going to give you a liberal choice. He's going to give you someone that's more in the center of the party, or a progressive choice, I should say. I know liberal is like a dirty word now, but
Yeah, how dare you?
uh,
Don't worry, that's what they call me anyway. So
they do.
because I advocate for electoralism, which is
Oh,
it's a bourgeois election. So
don't you know the system is rigged, man? Anyway, I think that it's about what we expected. There's certainly some disappointments. The two selections with ties to BlackRock, this giant financial firm, are very disappointing to me. There are also other areas where I think they've done better, and there are a lot of outstanding positions. I mean, most of the cabinet has not been selected, so it kind of remains to be seen at this point.
how do we get Rahm Emanuel a position in this cabinet? Because God knows he deserves it.
If you ask Ram, he does.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not fully convinced of the reality of all of this talk. I did mention before that expertise is what's valued in clearly by the nature of Biden's picks, and Rahm Emanuel might have expertise in a lot of things, yelling and cursing being primary,
Losing
uh,
seats.
but transportation isn't necessarily one of them. I know that the mayor of Chicago has a role to play in transit, and they own the airport. The city of Chicago owns the airport, but it's not really like he doesn't have deep-seated knowledge about transportation. I feel like a lot of this talk is being generated by sources close to Rahm Emanuel. In other words, Rahm Emanuel, and he's talking up himself and not necessarily doing something that the Biden team is really paying attention to or endorsing. The Biden team might like it because if every progressive is out there yelling about Rahm, they aren't talking about his other picks.
Yeah.
They aren't talking about the other guys who get in. They aren't talking about Brian Deese or Wally Ademio or these more obscure picks that are troubling in some sense. So I think it's kind of symbiotic, but I'm not convinced that Rahm Emanuel is a serious candidate.
Yeah, so there's that. There's the bait and switch candidate. There's the candidate that you hyper focus on, and I personally believe Neera Tanden is the bait and switch, where like in a very like establishment Democrat way, they thought like, oh, Neera Tanden, like she's progressive, she's at
They
the Center
did.
for American Progress, like this is the most progressive person we can put on here to soothe the progressive base that's like yelling at us.
I think
While
it's
simultaneously
absolutely
their
right.
real interest is, of course, replacing her. She'll never get appointed. She'll never get voted in because of how aggressive she is, I guess, with Republicans because they're little babies on Twitter, so that they can actually put someone who's way worse than her in that position.
Well, I think that's generally right. I heard I don't know if you saw Owen Higgins tweet out this thing where he said that he heard from the head of a progressive organization who talked to someone in the Biden team, and the Biden team said, "See, we listened to you. We gave you a progressive. We gave you Neera Tanden."
That's
So
insane. That makes me so that boils my blood. Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're right. I think Biden team. They're not necessarily following Twitter debates. They're not in the know to that degree. They say Twitter is not real life, right? So they're from their perspective, Neera Tanden is a progressive and is a conscious olive branch to progressives, which is amazing, right?
Yeah, well, her
But
advocacy for the grand bargain, truly, it was what I'm thinking of. When I think of progressive, I think, we need to talk about entitlements and how to
right.
cut them.
Now, look, I mean, I mentioned like better than the alternative is the watchword here, and the alternative for that particular position was this guy named Bruce Reed,
Yeah.
who was the head of the Bowles-Simpson Commission and has a much longer and stronger record of deficit hawkery and austerity than Nira does. So, I mean, even with her, you can say better than the alternative, but you can't say she's a progressive. It's just ridiculous. And the other part of your statement that Nira has maybe slim or maybe no chance of being confirmed. That's very possible. I mean, she has antagonized not just people on the left, which may or may not be reflected in the actual Senate, but she's definitely antagonized the right
Yep.
and Senate Republicans to a degree that they're calling her all but unconfirmable. And so we reported today that there's a definite possibility of that, and the person who might be waiting in the wings would be like a guy like Gene Sperling, who was in the Clinton administration, in the Obama administration, not necessarily a great representative in either of those, but he's one of these guys that when he's out of power, he murmurs a lot of very progressive things. Like Larry Summers does this too sometimes, and you kind of don't know what to believe. I don't really even have an opinion on Gene Sperling at this point, but although I know him and talk to him and stuff, but it's but that could be like what you're talking about with the bait and switch. That's definitely possible with Nira, that she's just unconfirmable, and that she takes the hit and somebody else goes in.
That way you say, like you already mentioned, the left, oh, they're just unappointable because they're too rowdy. The
Right.
irony here, of course, is that Nira has not done anything that the right has not done or continues to do on a regular basis, whether it be calling Democrats baby killers or,
Right.
just very aggressively talking about how Democrats want to destroy this country. She basically
Well,
does that exact same thing.
they've perfected what Digby Parton, who was a longtime old blogger, used to call the art of the hissy fit. So they are endlessly see themselves as victimized and persecuted, and whenever they get the opportunity to claim that they're being wronged, they throw a hissy fit. They say, look what you called me a name. You're such a terrible person. And they have done this. The right has done this over and over and over and over again for years, if not decades. And they're very good at it. They're very good at getting the media to focus on that rather than focusing on anything else.
Yeah, I mean, cancel
Um,
culture is literally exactly what you're referencing. It's like a
right.
weapon that the right has historically used and continues to use to this day. I myself have been a victim of right wing cancellation attempts that have been successful, and yet they also simultaneously act like it's the liberals who are doing it and do it successfully,
Right.
and only
Yeah.
them who do it. It's
I think it's absolutely a really cogent point, especially when the culture wars are running so hot. This is historically been done to undermine and demonize and get rid of prominent Democrats. Now, the fact that it's being done to Neera Tanden as like a scalp to be collected, like liberals are going to be real or progressives are going to be real mad about this, is kind of the amazing part.
yeah. No, I mean, she's horrible, but again, like you said, not as bad as the alternative, potentially, which is
Which is
hilarious because,
staggering to say, right? I mean, but I have to just look. I mean, there's relative terms and there's absolute terms. So, on relative terms, this cabinet is probably going to be better than Obama's cabinet. At least the first term cabinet. On absolute terms, there's still a lot of meh at best people and unforgivable at worst. So you got to look at it a couple different ways, but obviously the absolute terms end up being what matters because that's the people making the policy decisions.
so what do you think about the announcement of Janet Yellen and how the Dow still peaked at 30,000 after in the aftermath of that. Like, does that mean that they do not think that there is any sort of regulations coming for the big banks at
Well,
all?
I don't know about that. I mean, I think the Dow is being driven right now by tech. So, I don't know that whether or not she would augur, more banking regulation is necessarily material. I don't. I think that what happens to the tech industry is what's going to drive the market. And what happens with the vaccine is frankly what's going to drive the market. The fact that a vaccine was approved today in the UK is likely to be approved again next week in the US and then roll out. It shows that there's like a light at the end of the tunnel, and ultimately stocks, their bets on future performance. And if we get back to something close to normal in 6 months, that's going to be reflected right now in the stock prices, not necessarily the transition of power. So, we sometimes make the mistake of assuming that presidents have this control over the economy that is not necessarily always the case. Sometimes it's circumstance.
Okay, that's fair. So you are hopeful to, I mean, with Janet Yellen, or no?
Well, I mean, I think Yellen can be good. Yellen, her whole career has been about maximizing employment.
Yeah.
And, that's certainly what we need right now. Now, she's not going to be necessarily in control of that because the Senate's going to have to pass something. If you want a real major stimulus, it's Yellen can certainly come up with the policy, but she can't get it passed necessarily. So, what you see is that the Council of Economic Advisors, also a lot of labor economists, people who think about wages, people who think about full employment, people like Jared Bernstein and Heather Boucher and Cecilia Rouse. So, I think that I, I can only be hopeful at this point with Yellen and her management. I think financial regulation is going to be a really interesting part because she kind of deferred to staff on the Federal Reserve in terms of financial management. But at the very end, right on the way out the door, she put these really major sanctions on Wells Fargo for their fake account scandal. And so if we get that Janet Yellen, it's just Treasury has a major role to play in financial regulation. If we get that Janet Yellen, that would be a good thing. And of course, also, what's housed inside the Treasury Department is the IRS. And seeing a change at the IRS where they actually start going after and auditing rich people again, or reinterpreting the rules that they wrote around the Trump tax cuts to make them much more egalitarian and more progressive. That's something that's within the purview of Yellen. So I'm interested to see that as well. I'm going to lose power on my Mac if I don't plug in, so I'm going to go get a plug. So hang on.
Okay. As long as the IRS is not focusing their attention on Twitch streamers chat, we're good. Okay. David's not here to laugh at that, but if he was here, he would be laughing heartily. Okay. Anyway, I hope you guys are listen. I hope you guys are finding this to be informative, considering the fact that I haven't done like a super deep dive. I've only talked about certain cabinet positions. So I wanted you guys to get a better understanding.
All right. I'm nothing if not prepared.
No, it's great. Thank you for coming on.
No problem.
Okay, so you think that it's in her purview to restructure the IRS to ensure that wealthy people are being targeted, even audited if necessary?
Yeah,
And
absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
it requires some funding. The IRS has been notoriously underfunded for the last 2 decades.
that's actually a great
So,
question because it is a segue into what I wanted to ask you about funding potentially like a digital wallet. I've heard of efforts within the Fed to try to
oh,
put together a program, or I mean, try to put together a program potentially. Well, not efforts. It just ideas that are being thrown around as far as as like digital dollars or digital wallets to create a system in which you can directly give money to the people if necessary. Um, is this something
Yeah.
that
Well,
is
I mean, that wouldn't be under Yellen's purview. That would be out of the Fed. What you're talking about is something called Fed account, where right now every bank has an account at the Federal
yeah.
Reserve, and it's topped up and or down as necessary. This would give every individual an account at the Federal Reserve, and it would be a way to manage recessions. Oh, we're in a recession. Hey, there's $200 in your Fed account. Go spend it. So that's kind of the idea there. There's a guy named Lev Menand, as well as Morgan Ricks. They put together the idea for the Fed account, and Lev is actually on the Biden transition team. He's in one of the agency review groups. So, some. I don't know that there. It's interesting. Jerome Powell, who's going to be Fed chair for the next year, he had a fascinating exchange in the House Financial Services Committee. This was a few months ago when he was asked directly about the Fed account by I think either Rashida Tlaib or Ayanna Pressley. I don't remember which one. And what his answer was essentially, well, we don't know about that because that might cause some, unsound behavior at the major banks, and he couched it in these terms. But what he was really saying, if you broke it down, was we think that if Fed account was a thing, that it would work too well and put banks out of business. I mean, that's really what he was saying, that it would be too good. And the idea that the Fed should care about that is really suspicious. I don't think Powell's into it, but it would be required. It would depend on who becomes the replacement for Jerome Powell. His term would be up, I believe, next year.
I mean, that's not. It's probably not gonna. It's probably not gonna happen. I assume. Wait, there's a little bit of feedback coming. I don't know from where.
Is it for
Anyway,
me?
it went away. Oh, nope,
Oh,
it's
okay.
still there. Okay, it's fine. So the other alternative I believe is also utilizing the existing banking system they have in numerous parts of the country to at least like offer funds to direct relief to certain sectors, right? Even if it's not immediately the digital wallet proposal that you're talking about, that's another way to.
Well,
Um,
it's the Fed has seen its mandate as extremely limited, and that has played out in a few different ways. So they had this large sum of money, I call it the money cannon, that they were able to point at large corporations, and it was able to prop up the stock market for several months, right? Um, that capacity could also have been used to target smaller businesses as well as state and local governments to help them with lending to cover their shortfalls because every state and city has lost revenue in the pandemic from lack of sales tax and things like that. The Fed has actually issued only two loans from that program, one to the state of Illinois and one to the New York subway system. Uh, and the terms are too onerous. The length of time that you have to pay back is too short, and the Fed is really just not being creative with that option in a way that would get allow states and cities and small businesses to prosper. So if they're not willing to do that, the idea that they would do something for individuals
yeah.
strikes me as even more remote.
Well, that would be communism
If,
anyway.
if the Fed's off, yeah, right. If the Fed's off the table, then you're talking about fiscal policy, and we're having this back and forth right now. There's this bipartisan group led by Joe Manchin that put out a stimulus package. I think it's something like 900 billion. That includes some okay things, some not so okay things. It's definitely a compromise. McConnell, I think, wants none of it. He has put out a plan that is terrible. It has no extra stimulus check, no additional unemployment benefit, like an enhancement, like the $600 a week, and it only extends the two expiring programs, which 12 million people are on right now. That's where they're getting their money from. It only extends those for 1 month, and it includes this horrible liability provision, which for years
Oh
would
yeah.
get corporations off the hook for anyone who contracted COVID on their workplaces, and maybe even a whole bunch of other liability it would release corporations from. So uh, McConnell's not really being serious now. Schumer and Pelosi today kind of endorsed this bipartisan bill as a framework for negotiations. And they're trying to basically blame McConnell for the lack of stimulus. So now, if you have this bipartisan group, you have Pelosi and Schumer, then who's left? I mean, there's the White House, but they've kind of checked out. If it's not overturning the election, it doesn't matter to them. And then you have McConnell. So he's the roadblock, right? So that's what they're trying to set up. But McConnell has been kind of undaunted with that. So the idea that we're going to see any stimulus in the next week is I think pretty remote. There has to be a bill to fund the government that expires December 11th. So they're trying to tie this new stimulus to that funding of the government, and so that's the attempt. But I don't know if it's going to succeed. I'm pretty skeptical.
The bipartisan structure bill that you're talking about also still features the COVID liability, though, right? For the
It
liability
does, but in
coverage.
a different. It does, but in a different way. McConnell's lasts for 5 years. The bipartisan bill, and I don't endorse it, and I don't think this is good, but it only lasts for 6 months. Basically, it's a stopgap until states figure out how they're going to manage liability
I
on
mean,
this
it's
COVID
fucking
stuff.
insane that they're even considering it.
I
They're
agree.
considering that, and it's of course cleverly titled "Safe to Work," uh,
Right.
like literally
I mean, I
directly off
I
of Right to Work. Like,
I completely agree with you, and I think it's traditionally been a red line for Democrats throughout this process, and I think it still should be. But it's the one thing McConnell wants, right? It's the only thing left. He's corporations have been nursed back to health, and all he wants is to rid them from lawsuits. The funny thing about it is there aren't any lawsuits. If you actually look at who's suing and what the cases are right now, McConnell said within months there was going to be this flood of litigation, and we had to do this liability thing to forestall it. If you actually look at the cases, there isn't any litigation. There really just isn't.
why do you think there
And
hasn't been a sea of litigation?
um, I mean, I've heard some anecdotal things where people are having to essentially sign their rights away to go back to work. I don't think that's a major part of it. However, I just think that it's already very hard to bring a case against a corporation. If you can't do it in a class action kind of way, you're going to be outgunned. You're like an assembly line worker, a grocery store clerk, and you're trying to sue Kroger or Cargill. I mean, it's just very hard. And even if you succeed and you manage to get this all the way up, it can be appealed up to a Supreme Court that's very right wing and very pro corporate. So the idea that you need further liability shields for corporations when the environment is already so pro corporate in the courts uh, doesn't make sense to me. And it shows in the fact that no litigation or very little has been filed because, the litigants know that.
Yeah, that's devastating. It's just like really, really sad to consider. Um,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're give us some positive things to look forward to. We rarely even talked about John Kerry. I mean, is that even a big deal at all? The only reason why I'm
I mean,
mentioning
I
is
think,
because
yeah, go ahead.
no, I it's just because like Kerry was I guess lightly endorsed by what's it called?
What,
By
Sunrise?
what's up? Did
By
you say that?
Sunrise or
Yeah,
something?
the Sunrise Movement, and that was part of the reason why I feel at least somewhat,
I mean,
excited about it.
here's what I would say. What it shows is an attention to climate at a very high level. I mean, putting in an envoy that's at the National Security Council that says that climate is a national security issue and it's an international issue. And we're going to not just put some functionary in there who's going to get rolled, but we're going to put a former Secretary of State in that position who commands a certain degree of authority. I think that is pretty valid and important. So I don't necessarily focus on John Kerry, but focus on sort of what it signifies. I mentioned that whole inaugural thing in corporate cash. The one industry that's excluded from giving a corporate donation to the inauguration is the oil and gas industry.
Huh.
And that was also true of Biden's campaign. He did not accept donations from oil and gas executives. So the Biden team, at least they're talking the talk on paying attention to climate. When you heard Biden's acceptance speech after he was being made the president elect, he talked about four pillars, and one of them was climate. It's very clear to me that he wants to do things like green infrastructure, that he wants to rejoin the Paris Agreement, that he wants to come up with international agreements on lowering greenhouse gas emissions. Uh, you know, I can only take him at his word at this point because he hasn't done anything, and he does seem sincere on wanting to do all that stuff.
So Paris
So
Accord and maybe slapping a cap and trade is what you're saying.
Paris Accord, but maybe I don't know about cap and trade. I mean, because you need votes to get that. But what he might do is reinstate the Clean Power Plan, which was Obama's plan to reduce pollution at power plants. And that's actually more of a command and control kind of aspect rather than cap and trade where you're selling credits and things. He also GM pulled out of the Trump administration's fuel standards.
Yeah.
Uh, that makes it seem like they're going to go back to Biden and elevate those standards. I know GM Chevy has put like a huge bet on electric cars. Biden has talked a lot about electric car infrastructure. So, I think there's some reason to be hopeful a little bit on climate. Cutting against that is the presence of all these BlackRock guys, right? I don't think anything's going to be an unadulterated win. It's going to be a game of inches that you're going to fight for everything. But there are opportunities there, I think, and not just in climate.
Okay. Last question I have for you is
Okay.
Guitar Hero Tony Blinken.
Yeah.
What's your read? From what I understand, he has been to the right of Biden on foreign policy throughout the Obama administration, whether it be withdrawing troops from Afghanistan, where he was like, no, we need to do a troop surge, whether it be
Yeah.
Libya, where he was on board with Clinton's plan of joining Europe and destabilizing Libya. We know how that turned out. We also know how Afghanistan turned out. Do you think he's going
Yeah.
to be somewhat of a hawk, or do you think he's going to be
Well,
what does his presence tell you about foreign policy?
yeah. So, I mean, Blinken is a longtime aide of Biden's. He is an avowed kind of liberal internationalist, someone who is willing to do liberal interventionism. We've written a fair bit about him. Our managing editor, Jonathan Geyer, wrote this piece about the place where Blinken worked for the last 4 years, this consultant called West Exec Advisors. Jonathan kind of broke that story,
You
actually.
mean
Uh,
participated in society? Yeah, that's what I thought.
yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah.
There's some conflicts of interest there that you got to think about. I do think that when you're talking about foreign policy, that's an area where Biden sort of thinks that he's an authority. I mean, he really does. He was the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee. in the Senate. He constantly talks about how he's talked to every foreign leader, how he knows all of them very well. And he's going to be more of a decider, I think, on foreign policy issues than he's going to be on domestic policy, where he might just sort of cede to his advisors. So I think the advisors are more important on the domestic side than they are on the foreign policy side. I could be wrong about that, but that's just sort of my gut feeling on it. What does that mean? Like, what does Biden believe? Well, that's a really good question. I mean, during the Obama administration, he opposed the surge in Afghanistan, but he also came up with the most cockamamie, stupid idea for partitioning Iraq, which would have been just an absolute disaster. So I don't know if we can say something definitively about Biden's foreign policy instincts. But I do think that he is going to a large degree, set the standard on those issues. He'll certainly take advice from people like Blinken, but ultimately it'll be Biden's call.
Okay. All right. Do you have any
Cool,
takes
man.
on the CIA director? I know it's getting. I'm just trying to milk you for as much information as you have, because listen, there's a lot of younger folks here in my audience that normally would not have access to the brilliant mind of David Dayen. So
I do have to jet, but and I don't really know a whole lot about the whole CIA thing. I mean, I know that Michael Morrell was seen as a choice, and then he got knocked out, I think. But that's not really my field of expertise. But it's important. We have other people on our staff that deal with that.
All right. Well, David, thank you so much for coming. Where can people find you aside from the Prospect?
Prospect.org, and then on Twitter at DDayen, DDAYEN. And I do a newsletter every day about the pandemic called Unsanitized. And if you go to prospect.org, you can sign up for our Unsanitized updates every day in your inbox.
All right. Well, that's David Dayen, everybody. Thank you so much, David, for coming on.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
All right, folks. That was David Dayen. Brilliant. I'm very fortunate to be able to have people like him on the show. Yeah, definitely check out the American Prospect. They also, I think, have a collaborative effort with The Intercept going on currently, where they are, they're like doing something to collaborate with the Intercept. I love when you bring on other people on the show. Yeah. You really just blame us for his low energy questions? What? Wait, you think my questions are low energy? The fuck do you mean low energy questions? Man, I will hug you right now. Are you using the new Logitech keyboard? No, I gave it to my mom. I think the questions were great, dude. What the fuck do you mean? Thoughts on the possible position of these? These what? These nuts? Whoa, dude. Fucking got him, dude. Fucking got him, dude. Okay. You didn't ask him about dry jacking? Yeah. You know why? Because I want him to come back. Okay? Here. Rich people are going to colonize Mars without you. Travel bubbles lift the hopes. Dude, we've been doing crazy amounts of politics today. I thought I was going to do less politics today. Instead, we did more politics today. Should I do the one like Ellen Page, I keep saying Ellen Page, Elliot Page, transphobia segment by Crowder? Do the rich people vid, please. Okay, maybe later. 3, All right, let's watch 2, this instead.
1, 0. Ignition.
This launch sent 4 astronauts into space and made SpaceX the first company to
All right, I got to clean up a little bit
crew to the
while
International
this
Space
plays.
Station. It's a big milestone for the new space race, which already has all the breakthroughs and patriotism of the first one. But space can feel irrelevant, at least considering all our problems back here on the ground. And that's not a new feeling. In fact, it's exactly how some folks felt during the original space race.
I can't pay no doctor bills, but Whitey's on the moon. 10 years from now, I'll be paying still while Whitey's on the moon.
Even revisiting the first moon landing, a story we think we know by heart, reveals parts that have been left out.
We look back on the Apollo 11 launch, and we think at that moment the entire country was united around getting to the moon. And that's not truthful history. There were anti-war activists who were critical of NASA's involvement in the Vietnam War. There were feminists who were very upset with NASA's all-male astronaut corps. Environmentalists and environmental scientists were concerned that NASA was not prioritizing science on its missions. But really the most vocal critics were civil rights activists. Outside the gates of the Kennedy Space Center the day before the launch, the Reverend Ralph Abernathy organized a protest. He brought with him 25 poor African-American families, 4 old mules, and 2 rickety wagons. And he demanded a meeting with Thomas Paine, who was then the head of NASA. They were there to protest what he called, quote, the nation's distorted sense of national priorities. NASA was spending $20 million to house astronauts in these space capsules for 14 days, when housing in what was then called the American Ghetto was crumbling in complete disarray. And as they moved towards the center of the field to greet one another, Abernathy's group started singing, "We Shall Overcome." When it was Thomas Paine's turn to take the microphone, he actually looked quite moved. And he explained to Abernathy that if he could not push the button tomorrow and halt the launching of that rocket, he would. And then he gave Abernathy 25 VIP passes to the launch. Abernathy brought some families with him and used that moment to work the crowd and basically convince those VIPs that what was going on was unjust. NASA's popular image was tied to its budget. President Eisenhower established NASA as a civilian agency, not part of the military. And what that did is it tethered NASA to congressional purse strings. In the early 70s, that popularity began to decrease, partly because of these protests. And as that happened, NASA's budget also began to decrease.
Development of space simply cannot be all government all the time.
It's so sad when people are made to believe that the American government has such scarce resources that housing astronauts and the government focusing on like the space race or technological achievements is seen as it's directly at the cost of like housing African American folks. It sucks. It absolutely sucks. It's yet another yet another instance where we are fighting against our best interest because unfortunately that's just the false dichotomy that's been presented.
If we want to have a truly spacefaring civilization.
By the early 21st century, NASA hoped to save money while also promoting innovation.
No, it's not choice. It's not live.
Like SpaceX. And it's worked. Government contracts allowed SpaceX to innovate cheaper ways to get off this planet. But
also, anybody that thinks that fucking wealthy people are going to go to, like, they are the ones who are actually going to risk their own lives to go colonize fucking Mars are so delusional that I don't know how, like, I don't know what planet you're living on. Planet where you think fucking wealthy people who don't even want to wipe their own asses are going to go and, like, do fucking hard labor on Mars? Okay. Sure, brother. No, they're going to fucking send in, first they're going to send in animals to see if they can make the trip. Then they're going to send in homeless people. Then they're going to, or not homeless people, but like they're going to send fucking poor people, okay? They're going to test it out. on like fucking poor people. Then they're gonna send actual astronauts. Then, if it's feasible for them to be able to fucking send like multiple people in transit, then they're gonna start sending either simps, like Elon Musk simps, which would be pretty funny. They should do that, or like prisoners or fucking homeless people or some shit. If it's still a difficult trip to make, to go and do space work, like space colonization work. With like, why would they ever send rich people to do the work?
The source of that money hasn't changed. SpaceX is getting to space the same way NASA used to, with taxpayer dollars.
The only time rich people are going to see space is in like commercial space exploration. And even then, it needs to be like tested out 1 million times over before rich people will touch that shit.
It doesn't have to answer to taxpayers, even if they protest.
Stop the launch!
Just like hundreds of Armenian Americans who showed up at SpaceX headquarters in October, asking the company to change their plan to launch a satellite for the Turkish government. Activists worry it would help Turkey's ally, Azerbaijan, commit war crimes against Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh.
Wait, what?
SpaceX didn't respond to a request for comment and is set to launch the satellite by the end of the year. Now, SpaceX says when they eventually get to Mars, they'll ignore all Earth-based governments in favor of making their own, essentially building a celestial...
Disney and Soros? What do you mean Soros owns like 26% of Vice? What the fuck do you mean Soros owns Vice? It's Rupert Murdoch that owns Vice, dummy. That's what's actually fucking terrifying, and the reason for why you shouldn't trust or at least be a little bit more skeptical. What do you mean Soros, dude? The fuck?
Terrestrial gated community that locks out everybody else.
There's people already doing private space trips? Wait, has that started?
Is supposed to be for.
So the US, along with every other spacefaring power and many other countries that don't have space programs, are party to something called the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. This treaty says that...
Oh, you misunderstood me. They're not gonna fucking make homeless people fly the fucking fly the $1 billion program's spaceship. No, they're gonna pump as many fucking like labor. Actually, they'll probably pay. They'll probably still be well-paid workers. I was just saying, like in a future where like human transport is easier to space. Who the fuck do you think is going to build the space colony in Mars? It's not going to be rich people. It's going to be like, it's going to be people that are not worth as much.
Space belongs to all of us. It was a vow to not treat outer space in any way remotely similar to how the most powerful have treated Earth for the past 500 years. But what we're looking at is a set of private actors whose actions are not entirely subject to democratic control when it comes to governing human conduct in outer space. That background to these private sector launches makes it nearly impossible to see these otherwise amazing achievements as a step for all humankind.
Yeah, that's not happening. It's like sending people out to oil rigs, except worse because lol, of course. Send me first, fuck it. Look, man, I shit. George Soros owns 10% of Vice according to Wiki. Why are you questioning it? Wait, really? George Soros owns fucking Vice? A larger percentage of Vice is owned by Rupert Murdoch. Regardless. Like, the reason why Vice is a recognizable, known household brand is literally because of Rupert Murdoch. Murdoch's share is in public? Yeah. Wait, what the fuck? George Soros owns a part of Vice? I had no idea, dude. Wait, where? James Murdoch bought a Persian as well in 2019. The George Soros owns Soros Capital Management is a part of the investor consortium that loaned $250 million to Vice. Wait. TPG Capital invested $450 million in the Vice, a part of the $1.4 billion it raised from its investors in 2017. Check Vice Media Wiki, LMAO. Whoa, that's crazy. I did not know this. This is new. I mean, loan is not an equity interest. Yeah. But I know Soros owns a piece of Media Matters for America, or if not all of it, I think, right? But I don't give a shit about fucking Soros owning shit. Why the fuck would I care? Are you gonna play Warzone with Trouble Felix when the new Warzone map comes out? Maybe. George Soros is a billionaire. Of course he has ownership stake, or he owns a piece of he owns a piece of equity in so many different fucking companies and so many different industries. That, like, yeah, he's a billionaire. Why were you so quick to defend George Soros? Yeah, dude, I love defending billionaires. Like, what do you mean? I don't give a fuck. Fuck George Soros. Living on the ISS is not that hard. Probably better than much of Earth in 50 to 100 years. Also, rich people will bring their servants with them. He owns you. Soros owns is a misnomer. He runs funds. He doesn't own the funds. I don't trust him because Soros, Pizzagate, Clinton, Benghazi emails. Soros owns me too, brother. That's why I'm hiding the secret. I'm hiding the secret of George. San Francisco bans smoking inside apartments. Pot smoking, okay. What the fuck? Wait, what? How can you even do that? That's kind of wild. Like, in your own private apartment? Like, if you're smoking a cig? If you're blasting a cig inside of your own fucking apartment, the government can, like, come in and knock down your door? Like, unlike tobacco smokers who can still leave their apartments and step out of the curb to smoke in other permitted outdoor smoking areas, cannabis users would have no such legal alternatives. Porter said it's important to protect the health of non-smokers, particularly low-income residents who live in dense apartment buildings. If you are smoking cigs inside your apartment, I feel sorry for you. Yeah, someone has never met a cigarette smoker. You don't own the apartment, you rent it. Cigarettes destroy your homes is disgusting. So, of course, people who fucking smoke cigarettes, and like a lot of cigarettes, absolutely smoke cigarettes inside their apartments too from time to time. It is disgusting. When they ban gum too, they'll come for you. Yeah. You smoke inside? Maybe. Beat the fuck out of Hassan Cig Smoker? No, I don't. I don't anymore. Bitch, I'm live for fucking 12 hours a day. You think if I fucking smoked cigarettes, you wouldn't know? When the fuck would I blast cigs? What do you think? How do you think people smoke cigarettes? Like, if you're a fucking actual cigarette smoker, you need that shit all the time. Would you agree that Benghazi ain't going away? Travel bubbles lifts hopes of economic reboot.
This is what air travel looked like earlier this year. But when the pandemic hit, flights were grounded. Daily trips between New York City and London dropped from 30 flights per day to 5. And the world's busiest route from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur was cut to just 2 flights a day.
A travel ban.
We will close our border.
Travelers will no longer be permitted to cross the border.
Before the slew of pandemic-related restrictions, travel and tourism accounted for about 10% of global GDP. And now countries are looking for ways to restore some of that air traffic to help speed up economic recovery. So destinations are teaming up to create so-called travel bubbles, or what are also known as
corridors or air bridge, are all essentially the same thing. Is an agreement between two destinations, two countries, for a safe reopening of travel.
the critical part of a travel bubble. No 14-day quarantines on both ends.
We would only go on a trip if we didn't have to quarantine for 14 days.
There's been a lot of chatter around loosening travel restrictions, but not all of them qualify as travel bubbles. For example, New York City and London discussed streamlining restrictions, but it wouldn't technically be a travel bubble, because both cities would still have required a short quarantine. Singapore has been one of the most active in setting up arrangements that allow quarantine-free air travel between destinations.
I believe it is the first of its kind in the world.
Singapore has created no quarantine options for travelers, and so far, 7 countries have signed up. Here are the steps to flying quarantine-free and why travel bubbles could be one part of reopening the global economy.
Wait, what?
To flying quarantine-free and why travel bubbles.
This is in Turkey. Tunus tarihin 3000 yılı. 3000 yıl. Tunus tarihin 3000 yıl. That's Turkish.
Could be one part of reopening the global economy. During a pandemic, travel bubbles are meant to find a balance between two extremes, letting people come and go freely while risking further spread of the virus.
It says 3,000 years of history in Tunisia, but like in broken Turkish.
And the opposite, where your borders are hermetically closed, no one in, no one out, where the economy is suffering enormously.
Mario Hardy is a travel industry consultant, and he says travel bubbles can safely ease countries into gradually reopening their economies.
When it was first mentioned, people, yay, that's fantastic, that's a great solution for us to reopen. But after a lot of research, people realized actually it's not that simple.
Hardy says if both destinations have been successful at containing the virus, laying the groundwork can be easier.
Assuming you have a good control on both ends, that's one tick on the list of criteria. Second, you need to have a good healthcare system in both respective destinations. So you tick the box on that one.
Who will do a bubble with America? I guess there is already a bubble with America. It's called Mexico because we don't give a fuck. No, literally, like American, like one of the few places where like Americans can freely go and do as they please is Mexico. I guess Brazil, right? Maybe. Yeah, America basically forces it too. It's not like, well, maybe not forcing it with Brazil because Bolsonaro is a fucking idiot, but with Mexico, like, you can pretty much go there, do whatever the fuck you want. Bro, I'm going to Mexico in a few weeks. I might cancel it because I feel guilty.
The first type of bubble Singapore has rolled out with its partners is specifically for government officials and business travelers. Before anyone can book a plane ticket, they first need a specific document.
Probably the most important would be you need to be sponsored by the local company to kind of invite you over to the country.
Georgianne Lee is a consultant for hotel and resort development projects. Before the pandemic, 95% of her job required traveling on business trips. After working from home for 8 months, she took a trip from Singapore to Seoul in early November. Lee brought documents to the airport, including her test results and an itinerary that she had to stick to.
Now you need to also establish a safety protocol.
My raises why Republican grandpa has a home in Texas where he travels to Mexico to buy cheap prescriptions, but doesn't think we should have free health care. Brilliant. Brilliant, dude. So show us your Spotify review. I don't use Spotify. I live in San Diego. My boyfriend's dad just got put on forced leave at work for having dinner in Tijuana, even though he was there to pick up his granddaughter. Wait, what? New Cyberpunk photo mode trailer? Yeah, I don't care about photo mode. That shit sucks.
Between the two destinations. Well, he means testing.
Lee had to take a total of 3 tests.
So like a pre-departure one within the 72 hours before you leave.
Why are you saying Apple Music? I don't use any music. I don't listen to any music. every moment that I'm not live, I'm listening to podcasts or audiobooks or that's it. Literally. Yeah, I don't listen to any music. What the fuck, psycho? I mean, you guys, I'm live for most of the day. When would I be able to listen to music? Not even at the gym? No, no, not even at the gym. No, gym time is when I have to listen to the podcasts that I listen to. I stream 12 hours and I have to do news again the next day. Where do you think I'm aware? Like, how do you think I get aware of the news? Like, all the shit that I talk about on here, do you think it just gets beamed to the back of my mind? Okay, you're a little sus now. Wait, really? Literal psycho? Where do you think I have the chance? I can't listen to music while I'm streaming. Most of my day is streaming. I can't listen to copyrighted music when I'm streaming anyway because I'll get DMCA'd. So I listen to like lo-fi hip hop for the most part when I'm live. I listen to your live Twitch stream while I go over daily runs. I listen to these music nerds. Plagiarize news, lol. Yeah. I'm plagiarizing the Associated Press, brother. And the New York Times. I'm too busy plagiarizing the news. They deserve it. Not listening to Sammy Yusuf. Your Twitch career is over? What do you mean? You don't listen to music off stream like when you're relaxing? Is that weird? Am I the only person that's that weird? Anyway, I gotta run an ad right now. Top of the hour every hour. Fuck you guys, okay? I'm not weird for not listening to music. How did you interview Fantano, LMAO? This is proof you don't shower? Wait, what? You listen to music when you're showering? I listen to podcasts. What do you listen to when you work out? The news! Podcasts! The news! That's what I listen to. Dude, what do you guys think, like... How would I be aware if I'm live all day? How would I be aware of what the fuck's going on in the world? Like, please say psych. You are weird as fuck if you drive in silence. I never said I drive in silence. I always, when I am, Chad is gaslighting you. So you just listen to dudes talking 24/7. Yeah. I had this T1 clip that I used to watch all the time, but he was ranting about his work ethic in third person. He was like, chat, 11 hours a day, 2 hours a day in the gym. Girlfriend, how does he do it, man? T1, how? Because I'm different. We are not the same. I am different, and we are not the same. Was that good? Was that a good T1 impression? No, probably not. But yeah, that's what I do. I wake the fuck up, throw on some either daily up first, or there's another NPR podcast I listen to. Okay. Democracy Now! And Chapo when it's out. And that's what I do. I wake up, do that while I'm like fucking doing my business deals, or when I'm going through the day to like get ready for the rest of the day. While I'm working out, I do that. While I'm driving, I do that. You're wrapped.